after school hours. We do this study every 5 to 6 years, and the last one was done in 2014. And the data definitely have a long lifespan and continue to be used by programs like you in writing grant proposals, by policymakers, by the media. So this will live for several years yet to come. Just a little bit about the methodology. Oops, I went too far. Just flagging that the survey itself includes more than 30,000 households nationally, including about 250 in Alaska. We do the survey online, but also supplement it with phone calls and offer it in both English and Spanish to try and reach as many households as we possibly can. All right, so we have 5 big takeaways from our research, and I'm just going to walk quickly through each of these in a little more detail. Just pausing for a moment to echo Thomas's congratulations around coming in at number 4 in the America After 3 p.m. top 10 list before we dig into the findings. Most of what I'm going to share is Alaska specific, but in some cases it will only be national because of the size of the sample in Alaska, and I'll just be sure to flag that when I get to those parts. So our first big takeaway is that unmet demand for after-school programs has reached an all-time high. And you can see here that if after-school programs were available to them, 52% of all non-participants in Alaska, or about 57,000 kids, would take advantage of these programs. And that's up 21 percentage points since we did the study starting back in 2004. And it's the highest level of unmet demand in the history of America After 3 p.m. In Alaska, for every 1 child in a program, there are 3 more children who are waiting for access to programs, and that's pretty consistent with our national data as well. If we look a little bit more closely at the families who are expressing demand for after school, we find that families of color and those with children in elementary school are the most likely to want to participate in a program, and we see pretty even split between those who qualify for free and reduced price lunch and those who do not. I will caution, of course, once we're getting into kind of subgroups like this within the data, with the sample overall being 249 families, we're getting down to some pretty small numbers. So just flagging, like, not to take some of these subgroup numbers into too deep of consideration. All right, also looking at who's alone after school in Alaska, fortunately, the number of young people unsupervised in the hours after school has declined since 2014, including the number of elementary school students, which is good because at the national level, we actually saw an increase in elementary school students who are unsupervised compared to 2014. So part of the reason that Alaska makes the top 10 for sure. All right, our second finding is really around the key benefits that parents see from after school and how that contributes to demand. So behind these high levels of demand for after school is a growing recognition of the wide range of benefits that after school programs provide for young people and for families. And you can see here topping the list in Alaska are things like interacting with peers and building social skills, engaging with STEM and computer science learning opportunities, and taking part in physical activity are some of the things that parents value most. And then parents also recognize not just benefits to children, but benefits to families overall, and report the role of after school in really helping parents keep their jobs and also giving parents peace of mind while they are working. And as a result of all these benefits that are recognized from participation, we see for families that are fortunate enough to have access to a program, parents report the highest level of satisfaction in the history of America After 3 p.m. You can see in Alaska up to 97% satisfaction, which has grown from 91% back in 2014. The only thing I might caution for you all is like this extremely satisfied number, right, has gone down a little bit. So maybe there's some drop in the intensity of satisfaction, but still these are incredibly high numbers and really I think are a testament to the work that you all have been doing to provide really high quality after school opportunities for young people, with satisfaction really being like a measure of that quality experience. But sadly, for the first time in the history of America After 3 p.m., we see a decrease in the number of young people who are participating in after school programs, and cost and access are really limiting participation in communities. Cost, lack of a safe way to get to and from a program, and just lack of programs overall are the top roadblocks that parents report to participation. And you can see how that's grown since 2014. And in particular, I want to just draw your attention to the growth in the cost barrier, in particular for Alaska, where this has grown by 23 percentage points from 2014 to 2020. So certainly something to be aware of. And I know many of you are working to get more public funding for after-school programs, which would certainly help a great deal in reducing those costs too. The growing barriers are really translating into fewer young people being able to participate in programs today than they did in 2014. And in fact, participation levels now are at their lowest in the history of our data collection from America After 3 p.m. So really can be an effective advocacy message here to point out that these barriers to participation are limiting the number of young people who are able to participate in programs these days. All right, so turning to national data here, again, because I can't do this breakdown among participants or among those who are looking to participate in after school at the state level because of the sample size, but want to say that I think this trend would likely hold up across states. And this decline in participation in after school is not limited to Alaska. This is a national trend that we're seeing. And while that decline alone is troubling, the more troubling aspect is that the decline is greater among low-income families at the national level, where between 2014 and 2020, we saw almost 2 million low-income young people lose access to programs, compared to only about 500,000 of their higher income peers who lost access to programs over that same time period. So one of the things we tried to do was really couple our America After 3 p.m. with data from the nation's largest funding streams for after school to look at how those funding streams have been playing an important role in helping keep young people in after school programs, and in particular low-income young people. And we found that over this same time period, 21st Century Community Learning Centers in particular, as well as some of the state funding streams nationally, have been providing opportunities for a little over 2 million young people nationally. And these publicly funded programs have really been a lifeline for young people and families, right, in helping ensure a little bit more equity of access to after-school opportunities. And when we look at the funding for these programs, while on paper they have increased over the years, and in fact 21st Century has gone up by 28 million if you just look at budget charts, the truth is when we factor in inflation and the cost of providing quality experiences, that budget is actually lower, and in fact by at least $10 million. So we've got $10 million less money really to work with today than we had back in 2014. So just really helping us explain a little bit more about why we're seeing some decreases in participation. So I've talked a bit about inequities already. This is also national level data, not state data, but again, expect much of this might hold up too. You can see that the barriers are greater for lower income households and for households of color, and demand is also greater among these communities too. The inequities extend beyond participation in after-school programs to really go to all kinds of after-school opportunities. America After 3 asks about summer programs, but also asks about individual after-school activities like a club or a lesson or a sports team that a young person might be part of. And what we find is that it's not just that higher income families are more likely to be in after school, but they're also more likely to be in any kind of out of school time activity, with 9 in 10 reporting that their child is in some kind of after school activity among the higher income bracket compared to only 6 in 10 in the lower income bracket. And we know cost is directly connected to this, right? We see our highest income families reporting that they're spending 5 times more on out of school time activities than families who are in the lowest income bracket. So serious concerns about equity really come up here in America After 3. And then our last finding, fortunately, is that parents show strong support for expanding after school opportunities. You can see that support for public funding for after school is up from 78% actually in 2014. That's not on the slide anywhere, but I pulled that number. 78% in 2014 to 88% this year. So a big jump in the support for public funding within the state, and a jump in the intensity of that support too. And that support cuts across party lines, which is really, really remarkable. Also cuts across geography, cuts across a lot of different breaks of the data that we can look at. So after school really is one of those unifying factors for America and for Alaska. And goodness knows we need more unifying factors these days, right? So one of the last things we looked at was not just pre-pandemic data, but also getting a national snapshot on, even in the midst of the pandemic, what are parent attitudes towards after school like? And you can see this is just from a national survey, so I don't have Alaska specific information, but even in the midst of the pandemic, parents really see key value in after school and recognize that programs were stepping up and playing a role during virtual school days, and want to see Congress support that. They also, while the main concerns they express about participating in programs in the midst of COVID are COVID related, so not surprising. Once you go beyond those COVID concerns, the top barriers remain the same. There's still cost and transportation and lack of access to programs. And demand also remains very high, with parents still wanting access to programs and saying their child would participate in some kind of program if one were available to them. And public support remaining high, only dropping by 2 percentage points from pre-pandemic to mid-pandemic data collection at the national level. Yeah, so there's the public support number just in terms of what they want to see Congress be able to do. And then the last thing I'll just share is that, of course, in the midst of COVID, parents report their own struggles, right? But also say that while they're managing, they really do have significant concerns for their children, and those concerns go beyond their academic performance and academic achievement, and they want programs to also provide opportunities for young people that aren't just about academics, but really help give those opportunities for physical activity and building life skills and activities that help excite young people about learning. So one of the things we worry about is, as we emerge from the pandemic, that policymakers and maybe education leaders will really want to double down on academics, and we want to make sure that we're conveying a message that kids need much more than just more math and reading, right? They need time to be kids, they need time to socialize and get together in group settings again, and it's going to take some transition and some skilled youth workers to help make that happen, and that's really where the after school space can come in and play an important role. So there's where you can find more about America After 3. There's a data dashboard there where you can explore the Alaska data even more deeply, and there's fact sheets and all kinds of good stuff to download and take a look at. All right. And I haven't been looking in the chat, so if there's anything you want to lift up, Thomas, let me know.
Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing that. I want to open the floor for any questions folks may have around the data set that we have done here. Feel free to either place in the chat or take yourself off mute.
The decline over time, is that at all due to the COVID pandemic, or has that been a steady process?
So because the data were collected back in January through March, so in most places really before pandemic related closures or impact of the pandemic was really being felt, the decline is a pre-pandemic indicator, not something that's a result of the pandemic. So I think it really is about those barriers that we talked about, you know, the cost, the transportation, and the lack of available programs more than anything else.
And so folks know we'll be rolling out more America After 3 p.m., including fact sheets you can use to educate local policymakers. We're going to be mailing out posters celebrating our achievement at 4th place to all program sites. And we have kind of a slew of other things we're going to be rolling out the next few months to really give back to our field for their dedication and hard work. Thank Thank you so much, Jen and the After School Alliance team for all your help with it. And we are going to keep our meeting rolling because we got about 7 minutes left.